Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Stephanie Milner, and I'm a director on the Executive MBA Admissions and Marketing team. Thank you so much for joining us tonight to learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a student in the NYU Stern Executive MBA program in Washington, D.C. We have three fantastic students joining us tonight to tell you about their experience from the inside. We may have a fourth, so we may have another guest joining us soon, but we wanted to get started on time. So the format tonight is I'm just going to, give a little setup, talk just for a minute about the Executive MBA program in DC, and then we're going to go and let the students introduce themselves because they can probably do that best. And I have some questions prepared just to get the conversation started. And here comes our fourth student joining us right now. So I'm going to go through and ask the panel some questions. I have some questions that people submitted beforehand. If you do have additional questions, feel free to enter them into the chat or the Q&A, and I will most likely get to them at the end. It's hard to read everything all at once and keep the conversation going. So, but rest assured, we'll try to get to as much as we can. So really quickly, just a little bit about the Executive MBA program in DC. It is a 2-year program. It is based at NYU DC, which is in the heart of downtown. The format is 1 3-day class weekend every month. So that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that goes on for 2 years. There's also 2 required residency periods. One is the first week of the first year, and the other one is the first week of the second year. And in addition to that, there is a required 1-week global immersion experience, which is a travel-based educational experience that takes place in year 1. There's also an option to do another one in year 2, but that one's not required. So those are sort of the nuts and bolts. Our faculty from New York come down to DC and teach every class weekend. So you're really getting the same in-class experience that our students in New York get, but obviously in a different city and in a different format and in a slightly more intimate sized cohort. The average cohort size in DC is around 40 students, give or take. It's a little bit bigger in New York. So with that, I'm going to let our students introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about where they work and just in a couple of sentences, maybe why Stern for them, just to get started. So Tom, we can go ahead and start with you.
Great. So thanks, Stephanie. My name is Tom Maher. I'm active duty Air Force. I've been in the Air Force for about 20 years. I've gotten to do a wide variety of different areas, from flying to program management and acquisitions and different leadership spots. Was one of the things I was really drawn to the EMBA program with Stern was, like I mentioned, I've had a lot of experiences on the military side, but I really wanted to round that out on what is the corporate perspective, what's the business perspective, and how you think that way. To not only set myself up for success in current jobs, but also looking to the future for possible transitions out of the military. Thanks.
Shanice, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Shanice Steph. I am the Learning Culture and Diversity Manager at Remy Cointreau. So I work in wine and spirits. And I am in my 2nd year, so in this cohort with Tom, Sanel, and Anat. And I'm also the class representative for our cohort. I chose Stern just because it fit me a lot in the schedule, but also I remember doing a class visit and meeting a lot of the students and feeling like these were my people. And so that made this decision a lot easier.
Great. And Sanel, you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks. So name is Sanel Patel. I'm the Director of Business Development and Marketing. I'm also with Tom, Shanice, and Anant in the DC 25 cohort. The main reason why I picked the NYU EMBA program is I'm actually a chemical engineer, and I was looking to not just pivot, but also add to my resume, add to my connections. So NYU Stern was the perfect fit to help me grow as well. So that's why I picked NYU.
And Anant, could you go next, please? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anant Tiwari. I am a senior manager at Deloitte Consulting. The biggest driver is I think everything that Tom, Shanice, and Sanel have said, there's a lot of intersections over there. For me, the biggest driver was a world-class program, which allowed me to stay in DC. Having like very little kids, that was one of the bigger drivers for me personally.
Great. And sort of talk about that, about location and maybe jumping into the format of the program. I just wanted to ask a question about sort of what about the once a month format? There's a lot of different executive MBA options out in the marketplace in terms of format, in terms of frequency and things like that. And just talk a little bit about sort of, sort of the more concentrated extended class weekends, I guess, once a month versus maybe some other things that you might have considered and why you think that works well for you. Anand, since you were just talking, maybe we'll go back to you and go backwards this time.
Yeah, I feel the program is designed in such a way that it's very concentrated during those weekends, and it's essentially a mix of very interactive learning, speed networking, as well as like just essentially getting all the core courses kind of like addressed, and that once a month format works really well for me personally because being in consulting, there are certain expectations to be on the road every now and then, so it just kind of like keeps me very focused, and I can plan ahead in time, and essentially be a good parent, be a good practitioner at Deloitte, and as well as like be a very present student in the current format. Back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. And Snell, same question, like what about the format sort of works for you?
Yeah, and I think just the need of just having 3 days once a month is kind of, it's perfect, where normally with other programs you have 2 days or 1 day, whatever, but this you actually completely focused for those 3 days. Once a month, you're going to hit it hard, focus hard, and then you can go back to a normal life. But that the nature of just this 3 days, it's normally you spend the first day or the first section just recapping, where when you have 3 days, you actually can spend more time diving into the class and more new material. So that's one really nice thing about the cohort and the class.
Great. And we actually already had a question. So Shanice, I'm going to jump to you just to talk a little bit about work-life balance. You all really have interesting, vibrant careers. And just with the format, just in terms of the balance, could you talk a little bit about, obviously it's concentrated on class weekends, but could you talk a little bit about sort of managing the workload of school, and then coming to school 3 days a week and sort of how that balance works for you?
Yeah, so I'm actually a commuter. So I live in New York City and then I come down to DC. And I often get asked, like, why did I do the DC program rather than New York? And for me, that concentrated weekend is a good way for me to unplug. It's easier for me to like balance my work schedule and say I'm going to be off work once a month for a Friday, and like really engage in the learning rather than every other week. And so it allows me to like balance. I think also we have projects in between. So even though class maybe once a month, you might have office hours on like a Thursday or a Tuesday, depending on the professor. And a lot of times those are also recorded. So it's great to still have flexibility within, but even though you may be in class once a month, you'll probably still have some kind of projects or an assignment that's due a week after or a week before. And so for me, balancing working in the wine and spirits, it's a very social industry. And so I wanted to, have something that I would have flexibility to still have a vibrant social life, but to also spend time plugging in. And I think it's easier when it's once a month. That format allows me to just like really engage. Also, the team does a really good job if you're traveling in, sending us our hotel reservations and like, we get breakfast and lunch. So those things are kind of taken care of, our books. And that also helps me as a professional, just managing the expectations of the program, and knowing that everything is all in one place. Our Brightspace that we use is also like a good hub where you can find all your class links and syllabus. And so for me, that's been really helpful. At the start of each semester, I kind of just calendar out what my assignments are going to be, and manage my time around that.
I think the only
Thank
thing
you.
I'll add is
Yeah,
that
I was going to say,
everybody hit
Tom,
on the big,
same
yeah,
question.
everybody hit on the big high points. I think it's worth taking a second, like, well, what does the weekend actually look like? And at any given time, you're usually in 2 classes. That's usually what the sections are. You do 2 classes for 8 periods. So like 8 days, that's 2.5 months or so. That covers a course. There's a couple times where you do have 3 where you double up a little bit. But essentially you have 1 class in the morning and 1 class in the afternoon, and you rinse and repeat that for those 3 days or that weekend. So in addition to enabling you to kind of balance your time as you go through the month, which that flexibility allows you to manage however you need to with everybody that's working and sync up schedules. It also allows you to really focus because you're only doing those 2 classes at once. So it's not a whole bunch of additional things going on beyond what everybody else has as a busy life, as a working professional and families and social commitments like that. So I found it to be very manageable from a time perspective. Like any academic program, there'll be times that you have more work than others, but as long as you get in a rhythm with you set aside some time initially and figure out what works for you and your schedule, it's absolutely manageable.
Great. And sort of building off that a little bit, just Tom, just in talking about sort of, the work you have and balancing it out. Could you talk a little bit about how you work with your fellow students and how the cohort works together? You are all in a cohort together. You sort of been through the trenches, so to speak, together. So could you just talk a little bit about the cohort format?
Absolutely. So I think it helps to, you mentioned that, there's initial offsite to kick off the program. That's actually really helpful. Go to New York and you spend, 3, 4, 5 days all as a group getting to know each other both on a personal level, but also kicking off the program from an academic perspective. And so that really sets a really good foundation of building those relationships, figuring out the background, so where everybody's from. Because as you'll see in the program, it's a pretty broad mix. So we have everything from a lot of folks in government, some past military experience, finance, talk about food and beverage consulting. A large number of areas are represented, and so getting to see that breadth of where people's backgrounds are from is very beneficial. How we kind of interact academically, there are a number of things like Shanice mentioned. Like we have group projects, we have presentation, things like that you work on throughout. You'll also have a group of people that you'll work with just to help ask questions throughout. The instructors are very available, but also all your classmates are a great resource.
Great. And Sanel, same question. Anything you want to mention just about the cohort and the experience and the learning experience with the cohort?
Yeah, and I think to touch on Tom's point, the way NYU actually selects the cohort is kind of very impressive, is that as much as you learn from the classes and from the professors, the cohort itself, every individual in the cohort brings something extremely special and vital to the group. So there's always, we all have a WhatsApp group text messaging section where we talk about different parts. If someone has some issues at work or needs help with homework, like the cohort kind of like works together. If you can call it, it's like one company and you just basically dealing with it. Everyone splits up, comes back every month, talks a little bit. It's kind of impressive how that cohort has formed. And it's pretty amazing how that works out.
Great, thank you. So this one I'm going to throw to everybody. So if you just want to talk for a minute, I'll throw it out there. Since you're all in the second year of the program, you've been through the core and you've started taking electives. Can you talk a little bit about like what your favorite class has been so far, or maybe a professor that you found super helpful or interesting? So, Anand, I'm gonna put you on the spot and start with you.
Yeah, I mean, professional responsibility. The very first course with Professor Bruce Buchanan, there were tears in people's eyes. Like the way he explains fiduciary duty at an individual enterprise, business B2B level. We all sort of like deal with businesses, our day-to-day work, everything, but the focus that he actually projects on what are some of the implications of not doing the right thing, and like how do you do things right, and how history has repeated itself by the means of various real life cases. I feel, I mean, that will always be sort of like my favorite. When it comes to electives, I just did AI models for managers with Professor Roy Dale, and that was pretty good. And then, I mean, everybody's favorite, Professor Lechner's, leadership and organization was another one wherein you really sort of like see, what are some of the firsthand impacts of strategic thinking, real-time problem solving. And in all of these three different setups, like three different topics, the way this whole thing gets even more rich is going back to what Tom and Sunil were talking about. You've got a judge in our cohort. You've got Tom is Air Force active duty. You've got like another gentleman who was one of the last soldiers leaving Afghanistan when the tour was getting over back in 2 years ago. So like those perspectives start coming out by the virtue of these cases, and it's cathartic. Like it's been very good. I know I took a lot more time, so like I'll just pass over to maybe Shanice.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Shanice.
So I would to build on that, I think in my first year, my favorite class was financial accounting with Eli Bartov. Professor Bartov, I came in a little worried because I work in HR. I do more qualitative work. I was a little worried taking a quant course and like how that was going to show up. And Bartov just really broke down, all the pieces and made sure that if you needed support, I think all of our professors have been there for us. But I find they just build that in. There was like a foundational course that NYU also released us before, so I could kind of get a sense of the language before we even jumped into the class. And then in the second year, my favorite has been an elective called Becoming You by Susie Welch. And that class has been great because in the DC cohort, we're such a small cohort that we dive into like who we are, who are our values, but then we've also like gotten feedback about our aptitudes and how people perceive us, and use that to imagine what you want your career path to be. And I think for me, that was a class that really helped me answer a question that I think a lot of people come in as an MBA of like, should I be a pivoter or should I be an advancer in my career? And I think it helped really dive deep into like, what are my values and like, what do I want to continue doing? What I might want to change.
Great, Tom.
Yeah, so I'll add a couple onto here. I think for the first, to the core courses, in addition to what Shanice and Anat were mentioning, marketing, which was completely nothing I've done ever. So just like Shanice mentioned on the accounting side, marketing is something on the military that was never a part that I was involved in based on my different career fields. So I found it very fascinating and learned a lot about how to think about how you position your products and how you promote them. So that was one during the core side. During some of our electives, I'd say one that absolutely stands out is high stakes communications that I took. And that was really, how do you focus the message? How do you make sure you can capture an audience? And that applies in everyday conversations to, big strategic conversations and pitches that you're going to try to make, whether inside a company or outside. And so focusing on that skill set and really having a very intense period where you're getting a lot of feedback and trying out new approaches and new things was incredibly valuable. So those two are certainly top on the list in addition to a number of others.
And finally, Sunil, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess you guys have hit on all the good classes. But firms and markets, I think, is one of the classes that I do take quite a lot from how you look at different firms and markets in terms of how each individual can bring to the plate. That was one class. And then as Tom mentioned, the Com Labs class, each individual that came to the class had one or two things that they really wanted to work on. And they were all different, but the professors took that into consideration and worked on each of us individually. If one person staggered during talking or just had these different points that they wanted to improve on, they made it happen or got us out of our comfort zone, and we were actually able to improve on that. And it's kind of extremely strange, just in that 4 days that we had, we improved so rapidly. That was something that was definitely impressive to see.
Great. And sort of working off that, Snell, just to keep you talking, sort of along those lines, I guess now that you've been in the program for over a year, can you give an example of maybe how you sort of, maybe tackled a problem at work or something happened at work, essentially professionally, where you were like, oh, wait, I know this, or I have a different skill set. Just how sort of just some part of the real-time application of coming to school and then going back to work.
Yeah, to be honest, the one thing that my company does allow is that I can utilize my MBA right away. So that's something that definitely just managing work, but also taking that what I'm learning in class and implementing it right away. So that's something that definitely has been something that I've been able to take, but also the confidence. I think it's a lot of it has to do with confidence and being comfortable in your skin. So once the MBA gives you that confidence because you can speak that lingo, you can speak between departments because you're speaking to the cohort, learning from the professors as well. So just being comfortable is something that is extremely different that happens in the 2 years that completely changes about you.
Yeah, and then on same question, just I guess something about the real-time application of what you've been learning in the MBA and work.
Yeah, I feel when I first started the program, I just sort of like every single course I went into, the question that I was asking was, being a consultant, what can I take back to my clients, to the firm? And I remember when we started the marketing, there was a concept of portfolio management wherein you would just like bifurcate where you want to sort of like invest more and like where you need to like stop investing. I do tech strategy for large healthcare organizations across the US, and I was able to essentially take that framework back to my client and sort of like, we were able to kind of like create an accelerator out of it. So that was pretty interesting.
Thank you. And Shanice, can you talk a little bit about the global immersion experience and maybe where you guys went in year one and what that was like?
Yeah, and I think this also kind of answers the question that was in the chat. So your first year, all of your classes are the core classes and you take them as a cohort. And towards the end of your spring semester, everyone takes this global immersion experience where we go to another country. And so for us, our global immersion was in Argentina. We went to Buenos Aires. And it was a great experience because I love to travel, but it was a different experience traveling with the school. And that like we met CEOs of like, large corporations. We also met CEOs of tech firms. And I remember one of my favorite moments was like getting to tour the soccer stadium and to talk with the head of marketing and talk about how soccer is like a culture anchor, but it's also a business and the challenges that they have within it. And then at night, it was great to be with our cohort to like explore different restaurants and like, look at inflation in a different way as we were like trying to convert money. So I think it also just gave our cohort a lot of bonding time as we were all together for, a few days. And I think in the beginning, you're all together as a cohort and having that global immersion was like another great moment to like bounce back and do it all over. But now we have deeper relationships. We all know each other. And that was a really cool culture moment.
Awesome. And Tom, we have a question about, unless you want to add anything about the global immersion experience, but we have a question about sort of picking classes. And to Shanice's point, like in the first year, everyone takes the core curriculum, which is a really broad-based introduction to all aspects of business administration. So to everyone's point, it's marketing, it's finance, it's strategy, it's business ethics, it's pretty much all the core competencies you would expect. But then in the second year, you can take your own, sort of choose your own adventure, as it were, with all electives. So could you talk a little bit, I guess, about sort of your options and your strategy in terms of choosing electives? And were you trying to fill gaps? Were you just interested in things? And I know you still have a lot of electives to go, but sort of how the process has been for you.
But the good news is I picked everyone I'm going to do, so I can answer that question pretty well.
I didn't know that, but that was a good setup. So that's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, I guess the structure of it is as you get to the second year, and there are a large number of elective periods. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but during each session you get to pick from two. So it's not like you have a very large complex problem, but you have two per session, and there may be 10 to 12 sessions total during that second year that you get to pick from. And from there, they have different specializations. So you don't have to do a specialization But if you wanted to focus it on different areas, for example, like finance or leadership or strategy, they have classes that are aligned with those buckets to really focus on those areas. And so for me personally, how I did it is I was looking to fill gaps in some of my knowledge base for sure. As I mentioned, one of the reasons why I took the program. And so how I specifically did it was the finance specialties. There's 4 finance courses that I'm doing those no matter what. So I picked those 4. And then from there, I actually looked at what sort of things I was interested in, regardless of what specialty or things like that kind of fell out. And they ended up being kind of focused a little bit on leadership and then some also on the strategy side a bit. So that's how I went about it. I've been very happy with the electives. I found it incredibly enjoyable because one, you're picking to match with your interests, whereas I cannot mention some of the AI management. Myself and Chinese were able to do some of the becoming you about how do you figure out kind of future career moves and things like that. So it's a lot of good options that you're able to pick from.
Great. I'll just throw this out there in case see who feels like answering it. We did get a question in the chat sort of asking about, any concerns or, sort of perceived weaknesses you thought you had, and not in terms of professional skills, I guess, because everyone's coming to sort of fill those gaps to all your points in the curriculum, but I guess concerns about joining the program in terms of impact on your career or on your personal life and things like that. And just if anyone feels comfortable answering that question, you can just jump in.
I can take a stab at that. I wouldn't say a biggest concern or a perceived weakness because we're all, mid to senior level leaders in our respective fields. We are committing time and effort to growth, and there are definitely areas we want to improve on. So when you have that mindset, essentially, making time for it, committing to it, all that sort of like follows very organically. Personally, for me, was executive presence and global mobility. I've got 2 and 4-year-olds, and we just welcomed our 3rd child a month ago. And like props to everybody on this call who, from a student standpoint, who helped me out, being my cohort mates, my project mates and everything. So keeping all that in mind, for me, the biggest driver essentially is how do I get to a program that has a global reach? And if you've done a bit of research on New York, you've got Abu Dhabi, Buenos Aires, London, all those different markets automatically sort of open for you. So when that's the driver, and in most cases in our professional environments, we're all being empowered to sort of invest in ourselves. Those 2 sort of need to align very closely for you to sort of commit to 2 years of rigorous learning, but also very fun experience. So no personal concerns per se, but drivers of self-improvement and global mobility.
Amazing. Thank you. Is anyone else?
Oh, go ahead, Shani.
I was going to say, I think what helped me was leading up to the program. I wasn't as, I felt like once I got into the program, I would figure out the quant stuff and being in the class. But in that time of after getting accepted, I spent a lot of time really investing in my relationship with my manager. So that way I could step away and not feel, like I'm losing something of work. I built that strong trust. I think also the people around me and my family and my support system, so that they knew that I would be going away for, a long weekend. And I think that helped make this a lot more seamless. And so I would, say that's part of the process too, is to think about how you spend your time and where can you create those pockets and where might you want to invest a little bit more now, so that when you're a bit busier later, you can kind of balance that out. Or for me, it was also getting in the habit of studying. And so for me, I spent some time doing more reading because I just hadn't spent a lot of time reading over, and being out of an academic point. So I think that stuff helped the transition be a lot stronger moving into the program.
Yeah, I think similar to those answers is that prior to coming into the program, yeah, it's a 2-year program and we're all very busy with different aspects of our lives. And so there was some initial concern on, yeah, it's going to be a lot to make sure you juggle all those things at once and manage it, and then still also get the most out of the program. Because at the end of the day, all of us are here to better ourselves and put us in a better position moving forward, both professionally, but also personally for the relationships that you build. And so with that in mind, it actually became pretty easy to, prioritize when we need to get the most out of the program and those relationships, but also, as you mentioned earlier, when we talked about the schedule, there's ability to manage that workload and that time commitment. So while that was an initial concern going in, it's certainly been manageable, and I've really appreciated that aspect of the program.
Great. And Tom, while you're talking, I had sort of asked you before we started if you were comfortable talking a little bit about just sort of the military community at Stern and being active military, and sort of what that's like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'll answer a few part of it. So I'm the only one that's still active duty in our cohort. The one that's after us in DC 26, they have a couple that are still active duty. But I will say there's a large contingent. So of our cohort, that is probably about 36, 37 folks, I think we have about 13 or 14 that have past military experience. So there's a significant amount that have had some level of experience within the military. And I don't think that's atypical for any of these cohorts, really, because you're around the DC area, so there's going to be a lot of that just to begin with, but also just the makeup of the cohorts. So from that perspective, there's a great built-in community that have similar experiences on the military side and can share that and help out along the way through various programs, different groups, veterans clubs, things like that. Those are all available throughout the program and NYU. On the VA benefit side, so certainly I'm using the GI Bill, and NYU Stern is a yellow ribbon program. And so you can look online what that means, but I actually just offer up. I'm sure Stephanie will provide our info afterwards. If you have questions, reach out to the student ambassadors. I'd be more than happy to talk to any veterans that are interested in how that actually works, day to day. But essentially, VA provides, GI Bill benefits, and then the yellow ribbon provides matching from the VA as well as from the school to provide a pretty good benefit. So by all means, reach out to for additional questions on the admissions team, and they'll connect you with me, and happy to talk about it in more detail.
Great. Thank you for doing that. And Snell, so we had a question. I know we had talked a little bit at the beginning about sort of why Stern, and just for the people who were joining us tonight, we very much and have asked our panel to be sort of discreet, and we don't name other programs. But I'm happy to have Snell sort of jump in and elaborate a little bit more on sort of why Stern, and why Stern was sort of stood out to you as the place you wanted to be for this kind of program.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So initially, straight off the bat, the rankings are important. I think that's something that all of us did look at. That was one reason why I did select Stern. Another thing was the once a month program, just knowing that I have to commit once a month for 3 days, I can lock in and just focus on that. And then another one was definitely the what happens after I'm done with NYU. So we have like a career advice group that can help us throughout our whole careers, that they will be able to walk us through. Like, let's say I get a call today saying, hey, you got this interview, this is the job requirement, what do you want to do? So I can easily call on these advisors that can help me at any time. It's not just like, hey, the 2-year program and then you're done. It's where they're constantly trying to work with you. That was one thing that definitely I was looking forward to, is like, how can I continue, not just have the professors, but how else can I continue to grow after that? And how can I utilize NYU's resources?
Great, thank you. And Shanice, that's a good transition. You mentioned you're a class rep. Could you talk a little bit about what that job is and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a class rep for the second year. When we first started, you get 2 class reps per year, so anyone can run. And then the class nominates who the 2 people are. We're kind of the intermediaries between the program administration and also with our cohort. So whether that's listening to what are some things the cohort is saying, some common themes, or even within our classes, what supports we might need, and then surfacing that up to our administration. But then we also get to help with programming, and we also now work with a new council that was started to help have more student-driven events. And so it's great because we help facilitate a lot of the what do students want. And sometimes it's easier to get some information through students. And so, whether that's us like, highlighting things that are coming in our weekly class emails, or, if career services is launching a panel that we think is really helpful, it's, helpful for us to be like some vessels to help point, our cohort in some different directions. So that's been a really cool way to have people gather. I think also, like, as a person who lives in New York, we get a lot of access to the New York campus. And so, our cohort gets to come up at least once a year to New York. And in that time, you also meet the New York cohort and, have some campus experience. And so it's been great to like join clubs virtually, and attend some of their events with alumni, and partner with other class reps of other cohorts. So I think that's been one of the great things that I liked about the DC program is like you have the smallness of DC, and then you also are attached to this huge organization in New York, and that's also, as Anat said, like global. So even outside of New York, and it's a really great way to be able to get that small focus. That's what I like. I like small, intimate classrooms, but also know that I'm part of a larger network, and connecting with alumni has been really helpful.
Amazing, thank you. So one more sort of go around for everybody, and then we can open up the floor to any other questions that the attendees might have. But if each of you could just sort of say like what advice you might give to someone who was considering the program, when thinking back to where you were, year and a half ago, sort of thinking about the program and whether or not to apply and what you would have liked to know. What do you think you'd tell them? So Anand, we can start with you.
I feel understanding the why is very crucial. This is a global program. This is a very robust, program. Like, not to go on a tangent, but Shai mentioned Eli Baratov, accounting professor. Like he's been on the panels of like some very high scale, court cases for DOJ and whatnot. Like these are very serious professionals. They're advising the top of the top in the US, and what is it that you want to learn and how you want to maximize your time in an MBA program, because you are already a highly functioning, super successful individual, is something that I suggest. I would highly recommend. I thought I had my why, and meeting the cohort, my why, my career trajectory, what I want to do, where I want to leave my legacy has changed like 4 times so far, and it's only gotten better. So having that problem statement / why is very crucial.
Thank you. Tom, you want to go next?
Sure. So, my advice is fairly straightforward and simple. If you're considering it, and if any of this has piqued your interest, I'm like, man, I think that's actually sounds like something that would, advance my future goals, or even more importantly, open your aperture up to maybe some new opportunities that you hadn't considered. That certainly had been the case for myself as I, try to map out what the next steps and future in my life. So if you're considering it and it sounds interesting, go for it. You'll not be disappointed, and you'll grow in considerable ways and meet a lot of really incredible people and learn a lot from them along the way. In addition to what Anand mentioned, of just very outstanding professors that you get to interact with, learn from, and utilize in the future.
Yeah,
Great.
I would say to build on that, if you're trying to figure out when's the best time, I would say there's never a best time. For me, I remember like looking at programs and then, thinking, well, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm not quite executive enough. And, actually you are. And this program helps you fine tune that. And I think that was for me, one of the biggest growths was to really think of myself as an executive. You don't have to be a VP to start this program. And I think that that's also like, really important because you have a lot of experience. You have, time leading teams. You bring a lot of value to this program. And I would say, just apply, see what happens.
And Sanel, you get the last word on this one.
Yeah. As I said this to all the students that I speak to is, if you want to learn something new, I know the work life kind of just keeps you learning a little bit in your field. one thing that I always tell the students is that you get to learn from other fields as well. You may think that you have honed in on your skills just because you're doing something particular. Like I thought I was an engineer and that's what all I thought. The program changes your thinking. It makes you understand who you are, as Anand said, the why. Just that the highlight of that, that's what I would highlight in terms of the MBA is that you learn so much. People influence your thinking. People encourage you. You gain in confidence. These are the things that even if you read a million books or you read, it's just not the same. So that's one thing that I would definitely tell everyone is that just go with it and see, you'll see how much you change in just the 2 years.
Great, thank you. So we got a couple of questions beforehand that I just wanted to answer. Some of them are sort of logistics about the applying to the program. So I just wanted to address those, but feel free to answer, to pop any other questions you'd like answered into the chat or the Q&A. So we did get a question about the GMAT or any sort of standardized tests to apply to the program. So we do not require any standardized tests to apply. They are fully optional. So that includes the GMAT, the GRE, or the executive assessment, which is sort of a GMAT Lite, which is now offered by GMAC. So none of those are required. If you've taken the test or plan to take the test for other applications or programs you might be considering, and you're happy with the score, we're happy to accept it as further demonstration of academic and quantitative preparedness for the program. But in the absence of that, we take a close look at transcripts and at work experience. So the short answer is no, we do not require standardized tests. So I just wanted to address that. And I think the other question we got was something I think that, the panel just addressed, which is that the name of the program is Executive MBA, but not everyone in the program is executive, meaning they don't all have an executive title. We do require a minimum of 6 years full-time work experience as a threshold to be considered for the program. The average in the program is 12 or 13 years. So it starts at 6 and goes to well over 20. So you can sort of do the average math there. So and that varies a little bit by each cohort. So, I think as long as those prerequisites, and our other prerequisite is that you have a bachelor's degree or its equivalent. So I think once those thresholds are met, there's a lot of room for a lot of different types of experience and titles and industries in the program. And I think based on what you've heard from the panel tonight, that's sort of what makes, that's the secret sauce that keeps everything really interesting, is the kind of people and the depth and breadth of experience in the cohort. So, I would say as long as our prerequisites are met, I would say go for it in terms of applying. So in terms of housekeeping, unless there's no other questions, to Tom's point, if there's anyone you'd like to speak to or you have questions for us, it's very easy to get in touch with us either via phone, which is on our website, but most likely people like to email us, and you can always email executive@stern.nyu.edu. It's pretty easy. It's also on our website. And if you haven't already, although you probably did if you found out about this event tonight, you can also sign up to receive emails about any other upcoming events or deadlines or application timelines or anything like that that's coming down the line. So you can definitely join our email list and follow us on social media, because we always post on there as well. So I don't know if there's any other questions tonight, unless anyone on our panel wants to have sort of the last word on anything. But I want to thank everyone so much for joining us tonight. This has been really great. I think everybody who joined us got a real lasting impression of what it's like to be a student in the Executive MBA program in Washington, D.C. We're really happy to have everyone here tonight, and we look forward to getting to know everyone more in the future. And thank you again to our students for joining us.
Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks
Good night,
all.
everybody. Thank you.
All right.